Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I am Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson for the match preview. Newcastle welcome Crystal Palace to St James's Park on Wednesday. It is their game in hand on Nottingham Forest. So it is a huge game for Newcastle United because let me set the scene just in case you've missed it, ladies and gents. Following Newcastle's 4-1 victory over Manchester United, it wasn't a dream, it did happen. Newcastle are fourth and just 1 point behind Nottingham Forest to lie third. And with a game in hand, Newcastle could leapfrog Forest and take that third position heading into another crucial game against Aston Villa on Saturday evening down at Villa Park. John, welcome back to the podcast. I've set the scene there. Are you pinching yourself? It doesn't seem real.
Well, I am, but I've been doing that a lot recently. I've got marks all over the body ever since Wembley or Arsenal in the semi-final. I mean, Manchester United was terrific. We are in that wonderful position you're talking about. When you think Nottingham Forest earlier in the season, we'd almost lost sight of them. Haven't we? Now we're on their coattails. They'd just flown away. I always said, and I'm not being clever, and I think you felt more or less the same way, that they'd overstretched themselves and that time would catch up with Forest, who have had a magnificent season, but time would catch up with them and they would come back closer to us. Now, if we beat Palace, we go third, and there's only the runaway top two, that Liverpool and Arsenal, who have been up there all season, that will be ahead of us. And we've got a domestic cup into the bargain. It is a matter of pinching myself, but it's a matter of steadying the nerves, Andrew. We've done 9/10 of the hard work over a season. Let's not fail on the final 10th. And I mean, that's got to be the message to the players from Eddie through Mad Dog. That's got to be message to the players. The players will know that themselves. It's like going around the Grand National course twice. Don't fall like Devin Lock. And for the younger viewers who don't know what on earth I'm talking about, that was a horse who went round twice, jumped all the jumps, was winning by a country mile, and for some unknown reason in the run in, just fell over an invisible fence, and it was invisible, there wasn't anything there, and didn't win the race. So let's not make a mess of things right at the end. The players deserve to produce a fabulous double, which will be the Carabao Cup and the Champions League. They deserve that. It's their doing that has got us into the position we're in to go third top. I mean, terrific. There was a spell this season. We had a good start, didn't we, without playing well. Then we had an iffy period and we got some poor results, especially at home. To finish the season like this will be absolutely fabulous. And then, we really topped it off with a terrific masterclass of a performance against Manchester United.
We certainly did. 4-1, as I've mentioned there. What did you make of it, John?
I just thought it was everything I hoped it would be. No how, no problem. At least not on this occasion. But I hasten to add, I don't want to go too long without Eddie because he's a crucial part of. He's like missing a major component, aren't you? Like when Isaac's not there, like when the keeper's not there, or the three in midfield. He is a vital part of the setup. But really, I mean, we blew them away. I mean, what it means, can you believe that it's the first league double we've had over Man U for 94 years? 1931 was the last time we did a double over them. They've been a jinx to us in many ways, haven't they? And that's why it was terrific to take them out and to do it so wonderfully. I mean, the intensity of our play is what staggered me, if I'm truthful, Andrew, and being able to keep it going for an hour and a half. I mean, the high press, it was the right thing to do. They played around at the back. They've got two goalkeepers, neither of which can kick with their feet, and that has been proved time and time again. So high press. They've got defenders, their back four, who are uncomfortable, who will give you chances, but it's a relentless, endless high press. And the intensity that was put into that game, but it was absolutely super. And the margin of victory wasn't in any way flattering to us. We were that much better than them.
Yeah, a great afternoon on Tyneside. And I've said this in 2 episodes before recording with you, John. The game could have ended 5 or 6, and we wouldn't have looked out of place with that scoreline. Brilliant from Newcastle United. And it's interesting you mention kind of not falling at the final invisible hurdle in terms of the Champions League. I think what's there is confidence. Now, yes, there is a bit of apprehension and a bit of nerves, of course, because we can see the prize and we're so close to it. I think that's normal, but I think the difference this time around is that there's confidence. Like there was confidence going into the game against Manchester United, and not that fear that we always used to have that either Manchester United would beat us or that Newcastle would slip up. There was just confidence Newcastle would get the job done. I think with every passing game that comes, there's just a growing confidence that Newcastle will clinch Champions League football. I don't know. Do you feel the same?
Yes, I do. I've said for a little while now that I do believe we'll get the Champions League. A lot of people say, "Well, let's stick with the Conference League because we'll win that," and we would win that. By the way, we won't win the Champions League, but we'll get the big dough, we'll get the glamour, we'll keep our big boys, and we'll get some more big boys. So let's go for it. And so but I do believe that the the one worry I've got, in as we smile and say all the time on this, Geordies always have one worry because we've been born to it with the football club we've been bequeathed. But the one worry I've got is we rely so much on the same starting 11, and they've been fabulous at Wembley and in the 3 games we've had since. There was so much, and I mean, I think there was more intensity put into this game than the previous two in the league. And maybe it was the same at Wembley, but it was going to be at Wembley. This is do or die, isn't it? But there was that much. We've got 3 games in a week. And these two teams, Crystal Palace and Aston Villa, are a step up in class from Manchester United. Forget the name Manchester United. Their team is not as good as Palace's or as Aston Villa, certainly. And what worries me, because I would automatically, without any injuries, start with the same 11 yet again, which would be the same 11 for what, the 4th game or whatever. Having put so much intensity just 3 days ago with the high press and the relentless, can we all, not just the odd individual, because if one drops off, then intensity is nowhere because you need everybody to go at the same time. Can we do that all over again on Wednesday and then do it all over again at Aston Villa on Saturday? It's a big ask physically. But, it's the same for Crystal Palace. And when we go down to Villa, and we'll be talking about that later, of course, they'll have just played against Paris Saint Germain. So they'll be drained emotionally, if not physically. I think they've got a bigger squad than us, to be fair, and he can rotate a little bit. But the only concern I've got, yes, we've got Gordon, but underneath Anthony, and by the way, none of the front three would deserve being left out against Crystal Palace. Absolutely no way. And the only concern I've got is nothing to do with the opposition, etc., etc. It's got everything to do with we put so much into that game. Can we recover and do it all over again for another hour and a half on Wednesday night?
It's interesting because having watched that game and then watched it back, yes, they pressed high and yes, they put a lot of effort into it. But again, it didn't seem like they put everything into it in terms of like the full tank. I'm not talking about their desire and their commitment and their want because that was evident. They wanted the game more than Manchester United. But I'm talking about using everything that they've got to win that game. It was a bit like the previous 2 games where they turned up, their ability was on offer, they showed that they wanted it more, and then they won the game, and then it was a little bit relaxed. And I think they're going into that Palace game, John, with a little bit left in the tank, if I'm being honest.
Well, they've got to have, and they are athletes and they have 3 days to recover, but they've got to have because they're going to be asked again. You can't imagine many changes, if any at all. And really, if everybody is physically up for it, and only the guys watching training will know that, if everybody's physically up for it, the team picks itself. But it's picked itself since Wembley. So, and by the way, utmost confidence in that side. But if you wanted to make changes, I mean, the only change you would make absolutely comfortably would be Gordon somewhere. because the rest would be a slight drop on what we've got because there's players that aren't available. The Halls, the Bachmans, etc., etc. Will Willock be available? There's players that aren't available, and therefore you've got to go with your 11. Um, and that's the only concern I've got. It's mentally as well as physically. Um, they've got to go to the well again. And Crystal Palace are no duffers. So it'll be interesting, but the confidence has got to be sky high. Once you're within sight of the finish post, you can keep going to a certain extent because you know there's not a long season ahead of you. You're not going for 9 months. You're going for 9 games, 8 games, 7 games, 6 games. So there's an end to it all. So you can keep going to the well. And, we've got to hope that Newcastle do that because if they do, they win.
Indeed, but as you mentioned there, Palace are no pushovers. They've come at this game in great form. The Man City defeat over the weekend aside, 13 points in their last 6 games, 4 wins, 1 draw, 1 defeat. And in truth, John, they'll be bitterly disappointed to have lost to Manchester City because there should have been 3 goals up. They had a 2-0 lead. Then Eze had a chance and got it all wrong, and Man City ended up coming back and winning the game 5-2. Interestingly, I spoke to someone who's pretty close to those at Palace, and they said if Mark Gay had been in that side, that starting 11, then they think they would have won that game. But you can tell by the way the manager's speaking and what have you, John, they're bitterly disappointed not only to have lost the game, but to have conceded 5 as well. How do
Yeah.
you look at what happened on Saturday for Palace? Do you look at it as, they were just unfortunate? It was kind of an error that they didn't win that game, or do you look at it as, when they really come up against an elite side like Man City, they might struggle, they might crumble to see a game out, and that gives you hope that Newcastle can have the same luck against them at St James's Park?
Neither, probably, if I'm absolutely truthful. And the reason for that, I say that, Andrew, is, that it 2-0, 3-0, remember, but one goal was chalked off and only marginally chalked off. I thought they were going to slaughter City, and then they get taken. Now, the brutal truth is, Manchester City, the league table might say they look relatively okay, but they're not the elite side they were. And you've got to take some of the blame if you're Palace for leaking 5 goals against City when you're 2-0 up or 3-0 up, as it looked at one time. I mean, that's not an accident. They weren't overwhelmed by sheer class. I mean, Manchester City are vulnerable these days. If you let them play, they'll play. And for some reason, Crystal Palace let them play, having absolutely dictated play to them to start with. And naturally, you're going to say if you're England centre halves out and you get done by 5, oh, it's down to the England centre half. If we'd had him, we wouldn't. Well, they might have only lost 3-2 if they'd had him. And he is a good player, and we think he's a good player. We being Newcastle United, else they wouldn't have tried to sign him for about 70 mil. So yes, he will be back and he will make life difficult. And they've got Eze and they've got Wharton and they've got Matea. And that was a very interesting decision, by the way, Andrew, to bring the top goal scorer off at half time when he wasn't injured. And it was done for tactical reasons. And they wanted to flood the midfield to try to get a hold of the game. He did admit that he made a wrong decision, but the manager, but he emphasised the wrong decision was that not bringing off Mateta, but the way he reorganised the side with the sub on. It's quite a brave decision, isn't it, to take off your top scorer when you're still in the game, and the game ran away from them after that. I hope he doesn't play Mateta up here as well. I mean, that'll do for me. But if we aren't about our game, they've got players like that that punish you. But tell you what, they'll be looking at us and they'll be saying, have you seen Livramento? Have you seen the way Barnes played? Isaac's absolute quality. Have you looked at their 3 midfielders? They're going to look at that. And if they've got quality players, let's not scare ourselves. We've got more quality players than they've got. They have got quality players. And I said before we played Man U that these will be a bigger test than Man U and a lot bigger test than Leicester were in the previous game. We're starting to get into the heavy artillery with Palace and with Aston Villa. It is a heck of a big week. And you're right, Palace had started the season looking like relegation candidates. Then they flew away and were terrific. I mean, they'd won 6 of their last 8 away before they got coshed at Manchester City. I'm just hoping that with the bubble bursting at Man City, that might make them go, oh, dear. Well, there's not a lot to play for in the league. We'll keep ourselves for the FA Cup, and then Wembley in the semi. We might. I mean, any side could win the FA Cup from the 4 teams left in. All four fancy their chances, Andrew. So they've got to. And isn't it ironic that Crystal Palace play Aston Villa in the semi-final? Our next 2 teams. But let's hope that 1 or 2 players look at it and say, well, we'll keep things ticking over. If it goes our way on Wednesday, it goes our way. But if it doesn't, we're not going to burst our britches because we've got the semi-final of the FA Cup coming up at the end of the month against Villa, and we've got a chance of winning that. Because they haven't got a chance of doing much else in the league. I think any outside chance of scraping into Europe's realistically not there, Andrew.
Yeah, maybe that FA Cup semi-final will be a little bit of a distraction. And getting back to Newcastle United, John, were you a little bit surprised that the changes weren't made off the bench until the 78th minute? So obviously Bruno wraps the game up with 77 minutes gone, and that might have been what they were waiting for before they make the change. But of course, that goal was the 4th goal of the afternoon, and some might say, well, actually, it was such a busy week. You're 3-1 up. Do you make the change a little bit earlier, save the legs of Kieran Trippier, Alexander Isak? Obviously takes off Joe Linton just at the right moment as well, because it looks like Joe Linton was about to get in a bit of a bust up. But I was a little bit surprised it took that long to make the subs with the week coming up.
Maybe Eddie would have made the subs earlier. Because Eddie wasn't in communication with Mad Dog. It's like if you're banned as a manager, you go and sit in the back of the stand. You've got a phone. It wasn't like that. I don't know. It's a two-edged sword, Andrew. I totally find. I mean, I've been banging on about what it means physically to have these 3 games in a week and the intensity of it all. Uh, and yet, in some perverse way, outside of Gordon, I was happy for subs not to be made too early because our standard drops, not alarmingly because the subs are made when we're winning, but significantly. Our standard drops when we put subs on. We put on whoever we put on in midfield, whether it's Longstaff, whether it's Miley. We put Callum Wilson up front, and good names, good guys, but you know, Callum still looks what he looks. A horse running free in the meadow, rather than the old one-eyed goal scorer that he was. Our standards drop with the subs. They're not going to drop with Gordon, but that wasn't going to be the killer sub because of the 3 up front playing so well, and you weren't going to take Barnes off if you could help it because he was on a hat trick. Although Eddie always takes off people on a hat trick, he's taken Isak off on 2 goals time and time again. But in a way, I was surprised, but in a tiny way, not thinking ahead, just watching that match, I was quite pleased, because our standard does drop. You don't, when we make our big subs in the second half, Andrew, off the top of my head, and I haven't looked this up, but we don't score again. When we make the subs and bring off we're good midfielders and Isak and a winger up top, we don't score again.
Someone might look out that stat. I don't think you're wrong, actually. From my memory, like you say, off the top of my head, you might be correct on that. One of the players that did come on was Emil Kraft. That is one of the changes I could see being made for Wednesday, actually. I could see Emil Kraft starting for Kieran Trippier and saving Trippier for Villa on Saturday.
Yeah, yeah, I know where you're coming from on that because Trippier, 34, he's had his injury problems in these games. He always looks in the second half as if he pulls up feeling the back of his thigh or feeling his calf. And it's very difficult to get 3 90 minutes out of him in a week, which is what we'll be asking. Again, it's what I've said, mate. I can understand that, and perhaps Villa is the bigger test. So you play Kraft, or you start with Kraft, and you've got trips on the bench. But whatever you do, and Kraft is a steady away sub, and I'm pleased to have him on the bench, and he's reliable. But he's not as good as Trips. So you are the side is going down one level. I think if you bring anybody into the side, bar Gordon, and you're certainly not going to drop either of your wingers or Isaac and put Gordon a false nine. If you bring on any of your subs, bar Gordon to start, you're dropping the standard that significant little bit because we can't bring on Hall and we can't bring on Botman and we can't bring on Willock, etc., etc. So we are dropping the standard. So do you start with Trips, try to get ahead, and then bring Kraft on, or start with Kraft, and if it's not going quite according to plan, bring Trips on? Under normal circumstances, I could see people like Trips getting a rest. And by the way, may I say before we go any further, and I say it every podcast, but I want to say it again. What about Tino Livramento? I mean, yes, I always say, what about Tonali? And I must say that again because the goalkeeper was lucky he didn't get in the way of Tonali's shot because it would have put a hole in his body. It would have gone straight through him. It was that fierce. But Livramento, I mean, damn, he doesn't run, he purrs. He purrs. He is an absolute joy to watch. And the way he made the breakthrough goal at the beginning of the second half, I know the assist will go to Jacob Murphy, but it was that long run down the left hand side and the ball whipped across goal of Murphy turned back that made the whole goal. And Thomas Tuchel was there. I tell you what, if Thomas Tuchel's got a better left back than Livramento, I'll stand tapping. Never mind a better right back. And he's on his wrong side. Have you noticed that he's on his wrong side? I certainly haven't. He looks absolute quality at left back.
Yep, another shout for man of the match because it was a great performance from him. But yet again, you could pick 7 or 8 players
Of
who
course you could.
really put in a great shift. John mentioned quite a few of them there. But I also think that's why Gordon will start on the bench against Palace because Barnes is in great form. Him and Livramento have got a really good relationship down that left. I think on the other side, Trippier and Murphy have got a really good relationship. Okay, I could see Kraft coming in, but we know Gordon isn't really that effective on the right. Interestingly, I thought when Gordon came on, you got Murphy going off and Barnes going over to the right. So if you want to read between the lines and look at the bigger picture, then that might be a little bit of a hint of who's higher in the pecking order for the left. It probably is Gordon, but also that could be meaningless, and it might just because he wanted Barnes to stay on the pitch to get his hat trick. Who knows? But we like to speculate sometimes. But I think on Wednesday, John, bar Kraft for Trippier, I would play the same team, and I think it will be the same team. Again, bar maybe Kraft coming in for Trippier and saving his legs for Saturday.
Yeah, the trouble is, once we get Palace out the way, we'll be saying, "Oh dear, can the same 11 go at Aston Villa on Saturday?" And it's bound to be like that. But it's a lovely position to be in, and the great thing when you're in this position is it's not just a matter of confidence. Adrenaline's going to be absolutely flowing through your body because you can see the prize. They can almost touch the prize, can't they? I mean, we're fourth. We can go third. We can go down to Villa third top. And I mean, what a position that is to be in. And by the way, I think, and it's just my own thinking, I think Villa is the hardest match we've got left this season. I think it's even harder than Arsenal because we've beaten Arsenal 3 times. Arsenal have never scored in any of those 3 games, and they are not the Arsenal they were 2 months ago, taking out the result against Real Madrid. In the Premier League, they've been dropping points. They've been drawing 1-1 in games they would have won comfortably a little while back. Maybe because I haven't got a centre forward, etc., etc. But they're not the runaway. I am reluctant to say wonderful things about Villa because they're not my favourite club. A lot of their supporters aren't my favourite supporters. And the manager's not my famous guy, having turned his back on us. Having said that, they've handled playing deep into the Champions League and being still in contention for Champions League qualification, and they can win the FA Cup. They've handled the season brilliantly. And so I think that will be a tougher game, although I hope they're absolutely on a down now after Paris Saint-Germain have completed the demolition job. But that can be the most difficult game we've got left. But this one, I don't see it as the difficult game. It's the tricky one for me.
Mm.
It's not the difficult one, it's the tricky one.
I think most people would agree with you on Villa's threat, and we will do a view from we'll do
Yeah,
sorry a match preview on Thursday. But all the more reason for Newcastle United to win on Wednesday. Obviously, there's bigger reasons to win. Do it for Eddie, get above Forest on the table. But that momentum going into that game on Saturday is going to be absolutely crucial because look, you beat Forest, or sorry, you beat Palace on Wednesday. As you said, you'll go above Forest into third. But then the gap down to Villa is what you'll be on 59 points if you beat Palace. So you'll have a 5 point gap down to Villa. You win that game at Villa Park, and you're away really. So that will start. I mean, it all started really with the first game after the League Cup final, and we said, let's set the tone, let's get the ball rolling. The ball is just going and going and going and going. So let's get a win against Palace, John, and let's give it another big shove towards the end of the season.
yeah, absolutely. It's first things first, isn't it? And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you can almost, you can't resist it, can you? When you get this close, you can't resist looking ahead. And but first things first, it's only a big game at Villa as long as we beat Palace and we're third. It's a bit of a downer if we go to Villa having drawn with Palace or heaven forbid lost to Palace. So we've got to avoid that first. First of all, let's take care of Palace and let's get to third. Now, if we do that, if we are third on Thursday morning and we've also won our first cup in Yonks, tell me why any player needs to leave this summer. We'll be in the Champions League. We'll finish if we get the third and stay there. Why all the talk about players leaving in the summer? And I think it's all agents and clubs wanting to be naughty more than reality. I don't think Newcastle will sell these guys anyway, and I don't think they want to go. But hopefully, all the nonsense that Geordies have had to put up with when is Isaac going to Arsenal? When is Gordon going to Liverpool? And when is Tonali going to AC Milan or Juventus? All this nonsense, hopefully, can end. Because if we get the third and stay there, why has anybody got to leave Newcastle? Why would anybody think of leaving Newcastle?
No, you're spot on. And I think that's why it's so crucial to get that Champions League spot because then it makes the, how shall we say, poaching any of our stars that bit harder. I mean, it's already difficult, Most of the players here absolutely love it. They've got a very special connection. We have already got European football on offer. Of course, we want the big prize. So it's already a little bit difficult to sell and move away from Newcastle United as it is. But hey, getting that Champions League spot would make it even harder. But as you say, we've got to deal with what's in front of us first and foremost, and that is Crystal Palace on Wednesday. John, how is it going to go?
Great question. I think we're going to win one of all, and I'm certainly not about to say that the war is going to end at home. I think we'll win. I think it'll be a lot closer than the Manchester United game was, or the game at Leicester. The last two where we've run away with victory, if you like, in the end. I think this will be closer because they've got better players. And I think it could be as close as 2-1 or a single goal victory by a single goal margin, a 1 goal margin. But really, at this stage, as long as it's 3 points, I'm not caring much about whether it's 1-0, 2-1, 3-1. It's as long as it's 3 points and we move on from that. And I do believe it will be 3 points, but I believe it'll be tighter in a closer game than the couple we've just seen.
I agree with you 100%. I think they will win. I know a lot of people are maybe waiting for my score prediction here because I did predict Newcastle to beat Manchester United 4-1, and I've had quite a few comments about that and asking, did I put a bet on? Unfortunately for myself, I'm not a betting man, so no, I didn't. But I will say I agree with John on this one. I think it'll be 2-1 to Newcastle United. Harvey Barnes to get the first goal as well. I'm going to back him to not only start, but continue his great form as well. But as John also said, whether it's 1-0 and off the backside of Fabian Schär, I don't really care. As long as it's 3 points, that is what matters. And we head into Thursday morning where me and John will be back, not only with the match preview, but also a review of Wednesday night as well. Hopefully we're doing it with Newcastle sitting in third and looking confidently ahead to the trip to Villa Park. But we will see what happens, but we are both confident. Fingers crossed they can get the win over Palace. It's been a pleasure as always. Thank you to John for joining us. To you guys, thank you for watching and listening. And we'll see you guys very soon.